Welcome to Friends in Fiction, 5 best-selling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristen Harmel, Christy Woodson Harvey, Patty Callahan Henry, and Mary Alice Monroe are 5 longtime friends with more than 80 published books to their credit. In 2020, they created Friends in Fiction to provide author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, and to highlight independent bookstores. These friends discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. We are so happy to be here because it is Wednesday night and it is 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and that means it's time for Friends in Fiction. Welcome to our show. We have so much to look forward to tonight. I am Patty Callahan Henry.
And I'm Mary Kay Andrews.
I'm Kristen Harmel.
And I'm Christy Woodson Harvey.
And this is Friends in Fiction, New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories to support independent booksellers. Tonight, you'll meet Christina Baker Kline, and we are going to talk about her new book, just out in paperback, called The Exiles. We'll be hearing about her incredible research, the inspiration, or I should say the inspirations plural, and of course, we will not let her get away without a writing tip. Her personal history that found its way into this novel is extraordinary.
And in support of our continuing support of indie bookstores, which you know we love, tonight our bookstore of the week is Watch On Booksellers, a vibrant independent community bookstore located in the heart of Montclair, New Jersey. We'll be telling you more about that in a little bit.
And of course, you know that every week we partner with Parade Magazine online. We stream from their Facebook page, and we have an original essay in their online magazine every week. So this week, Christy wrote about how it takes a village to raise a child. You can find that essay linked on our Facebook page and on our Instagram page too. But meanwhile, Christy, can you tell us a little bit about what you wrote about?
I sure can. So when Will was a tiny baby, when I got my first book deal, and I all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to, I can't do this all the time, full time by myself. So we were really lucky to find some family friends in our neighborhood who wanted to keep him for me a couple afternoons a week. And what the essay is really about is just how they became our family and Will's surrogate grandparents, and just all the things they taught me about being a mother. And they're a really amazing couple. And Jerry, who is the husband, passed away really suddenly from a heart attack. Like a couple of days before Under the Southern Sky came out. And it was really unexpected, and it was really, really sad, of course. And, he's one of my son's favorite people in the whole world. So it was just a reflection on, everything they've meant to us, and all the people that, help us raise our children. And so I was just interested from you guys, is there anyone that, maybe was a part of your village that's kind of unexpected?
Yeah. When Noah was a baby, I took the first 3 months totally off, which, that was such a weird feeling because I had him a little bit later. I had him when I was almost 37, and I'd been writing books for so many years at that point that I felt so adrift. It was such a loss of my identity. So I started having, it was very a difficult time for me. So when he was, I can't remember if he was 3 months or 6 months. He must have been 6 months. We started having a babysitter come, a nanny, just 8 hours a week. And I felt I was in the house with her the whole time, but it was that feeling of, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm handing him off even for a small amount of time to somebody else. She has become a part of our family. She still is. She was here today. I did a speaking engagement today. She was in college at the time, and now she's an elementary school teacher. And Noah is starting kindergarten in a couple weeks, and she's been with us all summer. And not only has she been doing just regular, playing with him stuff, but she's helped get him ready for school. Like not just the schoolwork stuff, but the talking to him about how exciting school is and how he's really going to make friends and, the ins and outs of the classroom. So I really don't know what we would have done without her. She's phenomenal. And that was unexpected. I thought I was hiring someone to spend a little bit of time with him for a short period of time, and she'll be in our lives forever.
Yeah, it's amazing how that happens. I mean, it's just, that's exactly how I felt.
We had a neighbor. We've lived in the same neighborhood for 37 years. We're in our third house in this neighborhood in Atlanta, in town Atlanta neighborhood. And when I first started going out on book tour, my kids were 8 and 4. And, I'd been writing at home, but going out on book tour was a whole different thing. And my husband worked, his job was about 45 minutes away on a good day. On a bad day, an hour and a half. So I recruited a neighbor's grandmother, nanny, and she was living with her son and daughter-in-law and helping raise her granddaughter, who was a year older than my Katie. And the kids went to the same parochial school, and we knew Nanny. And so one day I asked her, I said, Nan, do you think I'm ready to go out on book tour, and I need somebody that could pick the kids up, at school, and maybe take Andy to Little League practice and, get supper ready. Tom could cook, but since he didn't get home till 7 some nights, do you think you'd do that? And she just hemmed and hawed and said, oh, I don't think so. I think that's too much for me. Andy was pretty rambunctious. He was 4. But her son, Billy, came up to me at the neighborhood pool not long after that. And he said, Mama told me that you asked her if she would help keep the kids. And I think you ought to ask her again, because I think she really wants to do it.
Oh,
So she wants to be wanted. And so I did. And for years, Nanny, our nanny was her. And she was great. And she was so funny. She told me this amazing story about her own life and about her husband basically leaving and taking everything. And I used the inspiration for that, ended up in my novel, Little Bitty Lies.
wow.
Love it. You just never know what's going to happen.
She's 99 now.
Wow.
I mean, there's just no way we can do it alone.
Yeah. No.
There's just, I remember when Megan, who's now 29, and Thomas was 1, and I went to the gym because the gym had a babysitter.
Yes.
It wasn't because I really wanted to work out. I just had 1 hour, and this sweet girl, Catherine Bizzle, came up to me and said, I babysit, because she fell in love with Thomas. And just like y'all, she ended up part of our family. My dad, who's a pastor, did her wedding.
Oh, wow.
Her kids were, my kids were in her wedding. I mean, it's just, and we're still really close. My kids think about her and text her and talk to her all the time. So, there's so many instances where people come alongside of us. And I mean, it's just like this show, right? We can't, there's no way when one of us can't do it, somebody comes alongside. It's no different than with our kids if we're lucky. So, and I know Christina's had the same experience. We're going to talk to her in a minute, because I have heard that even her 3 boys have sang a sea shanty for events. I know, for an event.
That's amazing.
I know. And so now let's talk. I should have gotten a recording of that for the show tonight.
That's amazing.
Yeah, really.
We'll ask her to post it.
Wow.
We'll ask her to post it. So now let's talk about our incredible guest, Christina Baker Kline. She is a #1 New York Times bestselling author of 8 novels, including The Exiles, Orphan Train, and A Piece of the World. Christina is published in at least 40 countries, probably more by now, and her novels have received so many prizes that it would take up half the show. But I will say that tonight she just hit the New York Times again.
That's awesome.
Congrats,
Good for
Christina.
her. Yay.
Yeah. Her essays, articles, and reviews have appeared in publications such as the New York Times, the New York Times Book Review, the Boston Globe, the San Francisco Chronicle, Lit Hub, Psychology Today, and Slate.
Christina was born in Cambridge, England, and raised there as well as in the American South and Maine. She's a graduate of Yale, Cambridge, and the University of Virginia, where she was a Henry Hoynes Fellow in Fiction Writing.
She lives in New York City and Southwest Harbor, Maine, with her husband, David Kline. We heard it's her anniversary tonight, so everybody,
Happy anniversary.
Cheers.
happy anniversary. Anyway,
We've learned not to sing on the show. I mean,
I know, that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Christina and David are the parents of 3 sons, Hayden, Will, and Eli, who, as Patty mentioned, have been known to sing at Christina's events. You know, I follow her on social media, and I love seeing the clips during the pandemic that she shared of her son Eli's singing performances. It was so great.
Her new book, The Exiles, is out now in paperback and is a Target pick, a Costco pick, and a Barnes & Noble pick. That's like a hat trick or something, right?
Yes,
I
know, right?
That's a trifecta, or what is it when a horse, triple crown?
Triple crown.
Triple crown.
Trifecta.
We were going to get there. So this novel is so deeply atmospheric, and Christina's prose is so descriptive and evocative. And The Exiles marks her 3rd foray into the genre. Her other 2, The Orphan Train and A Piece of the World, were grounded in American history, but The Exiles takes us to Australia and beyond and spotlights a 19th century injustice that I was hardly aware of. So, but I'll let her tell you about the book. So, Sean, could you bring Christina on?
Hi.
Or we could just
Welcome,
talk about
Christina.
you.
Yeah, we'll just talk about you the rest of the night.
I now want to be on this show every day because
We do have some fun. So we are so glad you're here. The last time I saw you was at a restaurant in New York City with Paula McLean over a very fine glass of wine. So until we can do that again, this is the best we've got.
this is fantastic. And honestly, the combination, your chemistry, all of your chemistry together is just so infectious. It's a joy.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Don't say infection. We don't want to hear the word infection.
That is what when I do voice to text and I'm trying to say friends and fiction, it always connects to friends
It's
and
infection.
fiction.
It does on me too. It does for me too. Yeah.
So if that's what you mean by infectious, Christina, you would be correct. and our phones agree.
Yes.
So Christina,
Friends
it's
and
such a pleasure to meet you. Before we take a deep dive into the inspirations and origins of this story, can you give us a quick description of this beautiful atmospheric novel?
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on. So much fun. Okay, so The Exiles is the story of the convict women who transformed Australia and the native people, the Aboriginal people, whose way of life was utterly changed, you might say destroyed, when British colonists landed on their shores. And the whole thing takes place in the mid 19th century, so around the 1840s. And it's really based on a very true story that not many people know about. So that's the story.
That's awesome.
It is awesome. And you're right, because I didn't know very much of this story. I think I'd heard whispers about convict ships, but never thought about it being women and never thought about the actual impact on Australia. So before we dive in, y'all, everyone out there listening, put your questions in the comments on Facebook and YouTube, and we will try to grab as many as we can. So Christina, my favorite subject, one of, is origins, what I call origin stories. And in your author note, you say, attempting to identify the genesis of a novel can be a fool's errand. So here I am on a fool's errand. I've been on a lot of fool's errands, but here I am on another. And I've heard you talk a bit about your tingle, what we all of us often call spidey sense, and about the origins of this novel coming from 3 separate streams that flowed into the novel, this river of a novel. Can you talk a little bit about that? A bit about that?
I mean, I think something that might be interesting to people who are starting out, I mean, I always talk about this when I teach, is that I've learned to trust what you just said is spidey sense. We all talk about that. But I've learned to trust this feeling, which often is something I want to resist, because oftentimes it's an ambitious idea that feels daunting to me, that feels too big, maybe. I don't know enough about it. There are a lot of reasons to say no to a big idea. And Orphan Train was the first novel I wrote where I was so terrified for legitimate reasons of the story that it took me, I actually thought about that book over 8 years. I wrote 2 other novels. I published a book, and I just eventually couldn't escape this story. But the reason Orphan Train was scary to me is that, I mean, there were so many, but one is that I don't know if you guys have experienced this, but I stumbled on this story, and it's not my story. My husband's grandfather was, nobody knew, on an orphan train. Essentially, he was featured in an article on Orphan Train Riders. He was orphaned and sent on a train to Jamestown, North Dakota. He died, and my mother-in-law read this newspaper article. We were all there when she discovered this after he died. And he'd never known any of it. And so I knew immediately, I got that feeling that we were just talking about, immediately that it was this crazy idea. And especially because even in the article, it said that hundreds of thousands of children went on these trains. My husband was a history major in college. He had never heard of it. My father's a historian. None of us had heard anything about it. And the fact that the daughter of a train rider knew nothing about it too, which, by the way, I now know is not uncommon. So, but my fear then was that it wasn't my story to tell, as I said. And also, writing about the past was not something I'd really done before. And it took me a long time to realize that no one else was really writing this story. And then, 8 years later, there's still not a novel written about this. So I just plunged in, and it kind of gave me the confidence with my subsequent books to do the same thing. So in completely different areas. So with The Exiles, I read a little piece. So it was probably a decade ago when this first came up for me. I read a little article in the New York Times. There was a column called Motherload that was about parenting. Lisa Belkin used to edit this column, which, by the way, would no longer be called Motherload, I don't think. Yeah. It would be, parenting.
Parent trap.
Right, exactly. But weirdly, one week, she had a piece on these convict women and their children on the boats, on the ships, on these repurposed slaving ships. I think her point was, we don't have it so bad now. But I was captivated, and I didn't really know why. And I started from there to look into it. And I only know now, having finished my novel, that there are 3 different ways 3 different reasons that it appealed to me. One, I taught in women's prisons. I was teaching in a women's prison when I read that piece. And I was really interested in incarceration, what it does to people. Also, how women, maintain their sanity, have their identities in prison, and what the criminal justice system does to people as well. So that was one big interest. Another latent interest is that I had gone to Australia as a Rotary Fellow in my 20s, and I'd been obsessed with it. And I read this huge, fantastic book that I would still recommend, and it's still in print, called The Fatal Shore by Robert Hughes, who's this wonderful writer. And it's a 700-page book almost, and he devoted 1 chapter to convict women and Aboriginal people together, 1 chapter together in this enormous book.
Wow.
And that was the chapter that interested me most, but I had never really followed up on it. And then the third is that I wrote a book with my mom, a nonfiction book on mothers and daughters of the women's movement, meaning people, either the mother or the daughter, had been quite involved in the 70s and 80s and in the sort of second wave of the women's movement. And the question that we posed was, how do you rebel against a rebel? And is feminism passed from one generation to the next? And if, in other words, is that one of those things that people, that kids will toss to the side because they don't want to be like their parent? And we found that Yeah, so we found that there were the ways that many of the daughters rebelled against their feminist mothers was to be stay-at-home mothers. That was interesting.
Oh, wow.
But
Why do we
also,
swing these pendulums?
That's so
right?
interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
that feminist mothers raised feminist daughters, which was kind of interesting. But the point to me, what I realized that I had been so interested in is that we interviewed 60 mothers and daughters and had all these women's stories. And that project was so pivotal in my life because it made me realize the value of women's stories and also stories that have not been told in history enough, right? So what am I trying to do? I'm trying to tell stories that most people don't know a lot about because they haven't been included in our typical history books. So that's sort of the genesis of this book.
That makes me beg the question, Christina. You've got 3 sons.
Yeah.
Have you raised feminist sons?
I have raised feminist sons. I don't know if 3 of them would say that they were feminists.
Oh, that's funny.
No, I think they would. But yes, I mean, they've certainly seen me, working, and they're all sort of cheering on. But I will say it's kind of ironic and funny to me that I'm one of 4 girls, and I write about women, and I did this book on feminism with my mother, and I have 3 boys, and 3 of my sisters have 3 boys, which is hilarious.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, that's
maybe y'all were sneakily rebelling.
Yes.
Your DNA is rebelling. I don't know.
That's right. So, Christina, you talked about how you came to this novel and kind of all these forces that came together and told you, okay, this is the story for you. This is kind of the path we're going down. But once you have that inspiration and that genesis, you need to build that world. And you did that so powerfully here. So I would love to hear you talk about, well, and I know you've kind of said that too. There's a great quote from you where you've said, in ways large and small, the task of a novelist who writes about the past is to make it come to life, to find the singular details that make the story breathe, which is such a great quote. I mean, I write history too, and I 100% agree with you. Can you talk to us a little bit about the research you did for this novel and how you use that to bring it all to life?
Yeah, I mean, I did so much research for this book and for the other 2 historical books. I mean, I know we all do research when we write contemporary books as well, or at least I do, because I have a memory like a sieve. But I, of course, did a ton, and it was terrifying to be writing about a period. I know, Christy, you read it. You should write about the most. Kristen, you read about the most amazing, long ago periods. I'd never really written about any time before 1920. The Orphan Train story begins there, and my book about Christina Olsen and Andrew Wyeth begins there. This is the 1840s, which felt like it is an entirely different thing.
It's an eternity.
I've never lived in, so that just felt terrifying. So my way in, so I did a ton of research. I've been really lucky with these 3 books to befriend a woman, usually in her 70s, who's an expert on the subject and who knows everything and is really interested at this point in her life, perhaps, in sharing it. So I had such a person with Orphan Train and with A Piece of the World, this wonderful tour guide who knew everything about the Wyeths. And then for this book, I was doing research online, and I discovered this professor named Allison Alexander, who's in her 70s, who has written 35 books on the history of the convict women. She herself is descended from convicts. And she was that
just gave me chill bumps. That. Yeah.
It was so amazing. So I discovered her website. I realized that most of her books weren't available in the United States. So I emailed her, and I sort of stalked her and forced her to be friends with me. And then I went to do research, and we became really good friends. And if you go to my website, you can see pictures of us together and stuff. I just adored her, and I think she enjoyed sharing her knowledge. And so I'm reading all her books, asking her questions about them. And I found that she was just this conduit to this world in addition to all the research I did of other books and the, going to the places and all of that, which I find a pretty important part of the process. But I will say to me, the most important thing is I want the reader to feel absolutely present in the story. So I do everything I can once I've done all that research to get rid of every detail that doesn't matter directly to the story.
Oh, that's so hard.
It is
so hard.
Hardest.
I'm a good girl and I want to show my work, I find myself like wanting to prove that I've done all this research. I don't even realize I'm doing it, but of course I am doing it. And so with every draft, I just have to be more and more ruthless. There's this great quote from, I think Norman Mailer did a damning review of Gore Vidal. Gore Vidal wrote a historical novel, and Norman Mailer said something like, "No button, no bauble, no ribbon goes unremarked."
Can we make it a goal that we never get that review?
Oh my gosh. I'm thinking about some editing I need to do right now.
I know. It's not a question of like, is it in service to the story? And one question I got recently that sent me off on a whole tangent, but it's along these lines, is there anything that you did a lot of research about that you had to cut? And I became slightly obsessed with these bushrangers, these guys. They're often runaway convicts or ex-convicts who go into the bush and set up these settlements and live like crazy. They're like bad cowboys. This is how they lived, They were marauding, they would steal things, but they lived in these encampments, and everybody knew about them, and they were really kind of terrifying. And I had a whole thing where I'm writing about them, and then I realized none of my characters would have been there or seen it or experienced it, really. I had to cut all of them.
Oh, that hurts.
Worst.
No, it was such an interesting world,
But I also feel like the more you fall into that world and the more excited you get about learning about it, the more it kind of shapes your narrative and shapes your story, even if those things don't directly go into it. Do you find that too?
Oh my gosh, so completely true. And for me, I don't know how you guys feel about going to places and trying to be in the places you're writing about.
Yeah.
I have friends who have no interest, who write novels set in the past and don't, or just can't be bothered, whatever, don't want to deal with the travel. Of course, during COVID, it's hard. And I didn't get to do some of the travel for my next book, but I will. But I'll give you an example of something that I would never have known. And there are a million things like this. This is small, but it's in the book. So, my sister's often my travel companion, Cynthia, and we were in this fabulous little eco farmhouse in Hobart, Tasmania, 5 miles outside of town. And we're standing, it's this modern building, and the Airbnb woman had left us, goats, yogurt, whatever, all this stuff, this lovely, basket of stuff, a bottle of their organic wine. And so we're having a glass of wine on the porch at sort of sunset. And all of a sudden on the hill, there was a sheep's meadow in front of us. It was very bucolic and gorgeous. If anyone wants to go there, I can tell you where it is. And on the hill, we saw this movement, kind of like a rippling. And as we looked closer, we realized it was hundreds of wallabies, which are tiny kangaroos. They're like little kangaroos. And they're so cute. They gather on the hillside at dusk. And then in the novel, I describe it as like balls tumbling out of a basket. One starts hopping and they all hop down the mountain.
That's incredible.
And it's this crazy undulating natural scene that's only 5 miles from this bustling, capital city, whatever, town. Yeah. And it was just such a dramatic moment of seeing nature. And so I have it in the novel. There are a lot of things like that when I was there, I just took notes about. And we went to a wildlife preserve and saw these kangaroos. We were lounging with the kangaroos.
Oh my gosh.
So that was really fun. And just all those layers, of experience that work their way in small ways. Well, really here's to pull back. the point was that I wanted to show that for these English women, these British, English, Irish, Scottish, Welsh women, this was so mind-blowing. And in the novel, I have The Tempest as a kind of counterpoint, as a text. The one woman is reading it, passes it along to the next, and I saw this as a Tempest-like experience because these women go to this island and it is unlike anything they've ever seen. And it feels like magic in some ways, even though they're convicts and they're going into, this women's prison. The world itself is so vastly different than anything they've ever experienced that it is like a whole, it's like they're on the moon almost. And so I wanted to convey that, and going there and being able to see how different it is from the topography of Britain and, of course, our own was really important and useful.
Absolutely. Wow.
Yeah, I can only imagine what that would have been like. I had my grandparents on my father's side were Irish immigrants, and the only thing we know about my grandfather is that he had a brother. And when my grandfather came to the United States, his brother went to Australia, and as far as we know, was never heard from again.
Oh, wow.
So there's this whole branch of the family that we don't know anything about.
Where in Australia?
No.
Wow.
Well, you should
and
find
really
them. That'd be a good trip.
It's really just anecdotal. Nobody else in the family knows anything.
That's so interesting, Mary.
I think we need a trip to find out about it.
The only solution.
Anyway.
One of the similarities with Orphan Train and this novel, The Exiles, is so many descendants of train riders are doing massive amounts of genealogical research to try to find out more. You said your family's from Ireland. So many train riders are from Ireland.
Oh, of course, I remember from the book.
Yeah, and so many of the descendants of these convicts are also trying to find out where their ancestors came from and what they went through. And it's it's a sort of big world of that kind of work and research.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a rabbit hole you can fall down.
For sure.
Or crawl down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't you feel that with your own novels, that it's just all a rabbit hole and you have to be really careful?
Self-preservation.
Yes.
Say example, Bushmen who live in the mountains. Things like that.
Christina, the three women characters are two British convicts, and I'm not convinced that my great uncle maybe didn't have something going on. But anyway, Evangeline and Hazel, and an orphan daughter of an Aboriginal chief. Do you pronounce it Mathena?
Yeah,
Mathena.
Yes.
Mathena. They're also very different and unique. But you have half a dozen real life characters that show up in the novel. Would you talk to us about that, about the delicate art of weaving the real in with the fictional, and how you came to, I don't know, it seems like you must have lived in the world of some of these characters.
Yeah. Well, first of all, can I just say, I never intended to write novels set in the past. In fact, I remember, I don't know if you guys remember the writer, I mean, she's still alive, she writes still. Her name is Catherine Harrison, but she wrote memoir, and then she wrote a novel about like foot binding. I mean, she wrote a novel set in the past. And I remember thinking, what a bizarre choice. Like, why would you, she's a contemporary novelist, she's a memoirist, she's got it going on. Why would she make up stuff set in some time period she doesn't live in? I really did not understand. So it's not like I set out to do it. It kind of was a slippery slope. Orphan Train, only a third of Orphan Train was set in the past. And it was sort of the dutiful, I had to tell the story of the train. 2/3 of it was set in the present day, which I was much more comfortable with. And then the next novel was the same period as Orphan Train. It was the 20s to the 40s of the 20th century. And that did not seem like the past so much to me. But this one, I squarely went way deep into the past, and that was a whole different thing. So to your point, I never imagined that I'd be writing about real people and mixing them with fictional characters. That would have seemed so bizarre to me and false. How can you ever do that? But when I wrote I kind of had this trial by fire or immersion, this terrible experience writing A Piece of the World, because every character in that book really lived, and some are still alive. It was a terrible.
Wow. That's hard.
I love that book. I just have to interject and say that I just love that book. When you started talking about it, I was just all these little pieces of things that have stayed with me. Sorry.
No, thank you, Christy. I mean, it was my most hard-won book and the most terrifying book. And the Wyeth family is so litigious that it was terrifying.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
yeah.
no.
So Andrew Wyeth's, foundation and his family are very protective, and I couldn't use the cover on the book, which we had originally planned to use, the painting Christina's World on the cover of that book. Anyway, long story short, they were fine with it. I even did an event with Jamie Wyeth, who's the artist's son of the guy I wrote about, so that was all fine. But I learned how to write about real people, I guess, and also how to sort of extrapolate. And I gained confidence. And to your point, Mary Kay, I learned that Elizabeth Fry, for example, a Quaker reformer who wanted to help the women at the same time that she was quite judgmental about them, was a real.
She was a teeny bit passive aggressive, just
a little. She was like, well, you got yourself knocked up. Here you are, I mean, she was a little, and she was, but she was, she was also the only person who treated them like human beings. So you take the good with the bad. And there were, and then Sir John Franklin, who is famous as a polar explorer, as an Arctic explorer. There was actually a mini series called The Terror that came out last year, 2 years ago. And it was about him and his crew getting lost in the Arctic because they disappeared and never were seen again eventually. But when he was slightly younger, he was actually sent to Australia and was in charge of this whole settlement and all these convicts. So that was pretty fun to write about too. So it's actually become kind of fun to do. And my new novel, sadly, also involves real people.
Can't get away from it.
I know. It feels like, what am I doing to myself?
Why do we make our life so hard?
It's hard. Real people are hard.
These days I'm going to write a contemporary novel again. And we'll see.
Yeah, real people will call you up and threaten you and worse, stick their lawyers on you.
Yep.
Yes.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to see a lawyer letterhead.
No.
That's every novelist's nightmare.
Oh my God, nobody wants to see.
Totally terrifying. It's totally terrifying to see it.
We did a podcast with Jean Hanff Korelitz about the plot.
One of my really good.
I wish that book just knocked me out, and I was having palpitations reading it because every novelist's other nightmare is being accused of plagiarism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to talk about that book for 1 second because Jean has been a pretty mid-list writer for her career, and it's been frustrating as hell. We were just talking about that. And she is such a great writer. She's always been a great writer. And it's just that question of like, why did this book not, and she's had 2 of her books become movies even. And Admission. She's just a wonderful writer. And so it was always that question. So anyway, at the beginning of 2 months after COVID, she was like, oh, I wrote this novel during COVID. And she sent it to me on as an attachment. And by the way, I don't read anything online because we're all online all the time. And I have online, but I read the first 2 pages, Mary Kay, and I was like, oh my God.
I know.
And I knew right away. And I just read the whole thing in one night. And I called her up and said, this is insane. This is it. This is it. And it is. It's so fun to see the success of the plot. It's the plot of that novel that's so incredible. And the writing is beautiful, of course.
It's so propulsive.
Yeah.
And terrifying as to anyone who makes a living writing. It's
Yeah,
Terrible.
but it's so fun to see it take off. And Jimmy Fallon just selected it. I mean,
I know. We're gonna,
Yeah.
It's so great.
How cool is that? Yeah.
I know.
It's so awesome. Well, speaking of kind of that journey from, where you began to what ends up being your big breakout, I'm really interested, just kind of like moving back a little bit. You were born in England, you've traveled to Australia, lived in the American South, the Northeast. So I'm interested in how this has all brought you into being the writer that you are today. And backing up even further, how did you get into fiction to begin with?
It's a really good
Sort of
question.
2 questions.
So first of all, I don't know about you all, and I'm not going to presume anything, but in my experience, writers often emerge out of tumultuous families or backgrounds in one way or another. And it's not always true, but in my case, my parents are Southern. My mother's great-great-grandmother was the first woman to graduate from college in North Carolina. And my father was the first person in his entire extended family, not only to graduate from college, but to finish 8th grade. So this combination of a Georgia boy whose parents were mill workers and who had grown up on a mountain with no running water, and my mother, who came from a very educated, her father was a school principal, her mother was a librarian, and all of her relatives had been teachers, et cetera, and everyone had gone to college. Very interesting combination. And then add to that the volatile mix. They met at Furman, which is a Southern college where my dad was
in Greenville. Yeah.
My mother was valedictorian. My dad was a big football star. And but he went off and did a PhD in British labor history at Cambridge University. He was super smart. He was supposed to be a minister. He went to Wake Forest and he had a little scholarship to study for a summer, and it ended up changing everyone's lives. So they went off to England, where I was born, and I was born and raised there over 9 years, off and on, back and forth. And they ended up in Maine, where they became total hippies, threw over their Southern Baptist childhoods. And I had a really kind of creative, but also volatile childhood. And, my parents loved each other, but were pretty different, as I've described. And, so a lot of, and I think I wrote as a way to kind of make sense of my life. My parents both, my dad has published 12 books, all, with university presses and everything.
Wow.
One of which actually was a big book about Jesse Owens, and it became a mini series and stuff. That was his book.
Wow.
But not so. But I want to step back and just say one further thing for any parents of young children, but also writers. When people ask me, when did you know you wanted to be a writer, or when did you start writing? I always think, all children are born creative. Every child dances and sings and draws and, plays.
So true.
Right? Every kid is artistic. Yeah. And the question is, in a weird way, is not like, why did I continue, but why do kids stop?
Why do other people stop?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I love that.
And so I kind of think that I just didn't stop. And I also, just by my personality, I think I tell my own kids this all the time. People are going to be saying no to you in a million different ways, always throughout your life. And I had an impulse to just follow the yes, the small yes that came along.
Oh, I love that.
I'll give you an example. So I was in the 5th grade. And my teacher was Mrs. Carey, and she was lovely, and she wore wigs, I remember. And she gave us an assignment to write a little story or something, and we handed them in on a Friday. And on Monday morning, we came in, and this is back when the desks were lined up in rows, and she walked down the rows. She put each person's story down and said something to them and moved to the next. And when she got to me, she put the story down, and she said, I have to tell you, I really liked your story. And in fact, I read it out loud to my husband this weekend. And he liked it too. And that was all she said. Yeah. So first of all, the fact that she had a husband blew my mind. The fact that she
The fact that she didn't sleep at the school.
That she like went to school and had a different life. But she didn't say she loved my story. She said she liked my story and that her husband liked it too. And I swear that was enough to keep me going for the next decade.
Wow.
I was like, well, now I'm a writer because Mrs. Carey liked my story.
Oh
And
gosh.
I'm sure she said it to every single person she was walking down the aisle and talking to. But it really did. It was the smallest encouragement. And again, for teachers out there, like the smallest encouragement for a 5th grade kid makes a huge difference. And so I felt that, and I took that with me a little bit. And that was how it started.
I'm just impressed that your 5th grade self could tell she wore wigs, because I'm really bad at that.
Well, I think
even now
I kind of got that later. I think now I realized, that very black hair on that rather older woman.
That was always perfectly brushed and in place.
Sometimes the part was here, sometimes it was twisted 45 degrees. Yeah.
We should do a story. We should do a show talking about teachers who really inspired or encouraged us.
Yes.
I'll never forget, I had a 6th grade teacher. We had written some kind of a story. We'd been asked to write some kind of a story. And I was in the bathroom and my 6th grade teacher, Mrs. Allen, came in. And of course, it was hugely embarrassing that your teacher was in the bathroom.
Oh, yes.
When you were in the bathroom.
Being human.
And
Yeah.
she was in the stall, and she was laughing. She was just like, ha, 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 ha. And I'm washing my hands, and she came out and she goes, Kathy, I read your story and I just can't quit laughing.
Oh my gosh. That's
Amazing.
I know.
So cute.
The fact that she went to the bathroom just was stunning to me.
Totally.
They get married.
They go to the bathroom. No, I remember you would run into a teacher at the grocery store and you'd be like, oh my God, what are they doing here?
Celebrity, I know.
Why are they
like, oh my gosh, stay away.
Well, Christina, sorry.
I was going to say, I have a kind of bookend to that story, which is that when I was in college then, this is another thing that was, so I was in college. I got into this college seminar that was very potentially damaging. I'm shocked that I still am I became a writer, because it was with writers who are now famous, like names you would know. And the teacher was the teacher was a woman who had just won the National Book Award. And she taught me everything I need to know about what not to do as a teacher. She was a terrible teacher. And she was so awful in that she pitted us against each other in this creative writing work. And she was awful. And she was very intimidating, but also really uninterested. And you never even could tell if she'd read your work, that kind of thing. And she just was lazy and horrible. And she wore scarves. And she was very pretentious. But anyway, the weird thing was she, without telling or asking or even telling me, handed my the only 2 short stories I'd ever written in my life, really, to her agency, and they signed me on, and I was 20 years old. And that was a shock. First of all, she gave me an A-. She didn't even like me. But suddenly I had an agent at the age of 20, which never happens. And it was at a moment, I'm super old, but it was at a moment when Reddy Spinellis and Jay McInerney and Donna Tartt were all getting huge contracts at the age of 20. So you know how agents are often like lemmings and they sort of follow the trends. And so I think that there was a trend of young writers, which did not happen with me. But that gave me, even though that was a really weird experience of that class, having this young junior agent in this agency who was interested in my work and would call every 4 months and say, what are you thinking? Are you writing a novel yet? I think that had a profound influence on me, having someone who was waiting for something. And so even though not everybody has that experience of getting an agent at that age, I always tell my own students to have someone who's waiting for it. Exchange work with a friend, have someone to whom you're accountable, whom you respect, because I think that makes a difference.
That's great advice.
Great advice. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Well, Christina, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose our bookstore of the week?
Oh my gosh, yes. Watchung Books in Montclair, New Jersey. For 20 years, I lived in this wonderful, wonderful town. We left, this is it, Watchung Books. And here's something they do that I've never seen at another bookstore, and I love it. They have stenciled on the walls of the bookstore names of famous writers who are long dead and alive, everyone from, say, I don't know, Charles Dickens to Alice Walker. But then they also stencil the names of local writers. And if you've published a book, you have your name, or I think you have to have published 2 books. You have your name stenciled on the wall. And it's just such a really sweet and encouraging thing. They're amazing to their local writers in town, and they host book parties and all kinds of creative events. And they have a great children's section. And Margot, the owner, is just fantastic. So I can't say more good things about them. They're great.
Well, that's a kind of like a road trip bookstore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good road trip
If we go, will they put our names on the wall?
You have to write 2 books, Patty.
Okay, I'll write
on the wall, Patty.
I have to move to Montclair. Okay.
I have a magic marker, Patty. They can't stop me.
We carry Sharpies with us. There's no stopping us.
Of course.
Okay, since you have already given us so many writing tips, we are going to skip right over to if there is a book that you're reading that you would love to recommend.
Well, actually, I'm reading Amor Towles' new book.
I cannot wait to read that book.
We're so excited.
Awesome.
It's coming out. Amor is just such a delightful human being. I live in New York now, and we've done a bunch of events together. And he's super savvy about the writing. You guys should have him on. He's so fun.
Oh,
and so
we would love it.
We're working on it.
But his new book is called The Lincoln Highway, and it's this sort of epic story about the highway that crosses from New York all the way across America, and it's just beautiful and immediately immersive and fun. I managed to get my hands on Amor's book that's coming out in, I think, either end of September or beginning of October. The new Cloud Cuckoo, Anthony Doerr's new book. That's also 600 pages. And Jonathan Franzen's new book, Crossroads.
Oh my goodness. It's a big fall. It's a big fall.
And they're all 600 pages. They're enormous.
Wow.
And I just pray that all of them don't drop on my pub day.
I was going to say, please tell me they're not on October 19th.
What are these updates? Yeah.
I know, right?
October 5th.
At least I'm in paperback.
Okay. All right, Christina and everyone else, please stick around because we have one more thing to talk to Christina about. But first, we want to remind all of you to check out our Friends in Fiction Writers Block podcast. We have a brand new one every single Friday along with the shows. And this past week, Ron and Christy talked to Vivian Howard. And this week, this Friday, we were just talking about Ron and Mary Kay talked to Jean Hamp Corlitz about the blockbuster book, The Plot, that was just chosen for the Tonight Show Book Club pick.
So awesome. And in case you guys haven't heard, Patty, Mary Kay, and I all have winter books coming out, and we have a Winter Wonderland subscription box that we've partnered with Nantucket Book Partners to introduce all of you, and we're so excited about it. So if you purchase this box from Nantucket Book Partners, you can also get it off our website or our Facebook page. You'll get each of our 3 winter books and an exclusive special Friends in Fiction coffee mug and hot chocolate. So we're really excited, and we hope that you'll sign up.
I feel so left out.
All 3 of those work together. And how your 3 book covers, they look so great.
I know. Every time you guys show that picture, I'm like, I should have worked harder last year. I should have been
As if you could have.
There's a few things going on. I think
You're such a slacker.
Oh.
I really am.
We like tied up with a bow together in bookstores so you can just have
That'd be awesome.
Well, when we're all like, we can't live and we haven't bought anyone's gifts,
Yeah.
you'll be like,
we don't have a tree.
I'm finishing my wrapping.
Exactly. All right. So if you are not hanging out with us yet in the Friends and Fiction official book club, you are missing out. We tell you that every week. So the group, which is separate from us and is run by our friends Lisa Harrison and Brenda Gardner, is now more than 7,000 strong.
Yeah.
They just celebrated their 1-year anniversary. They had to put off their 1-year anniversary official celebration. That'll be coming in another week or two. But on August 8th, they'll be hosting a happy hour with our dear Ron Block, our Writer's Block podcast host. And then on August 16th, which is a Monday, I will be joining them to discuss The Forest of Vanishing Stars, my brand new novel, which, didn't come out in the winter. So I'm clearly the odd man out. But they have plenty more fun events in store. So make sure to join them now if you haven't, the Friends and Fiction official book club.
And next week, join us right here again at 7 p.m. Eastern to meet Lauren Willick, who wrote the historical fiction novel Band of Sisters, along with our first special guest co-host, Christina McMorris, will be stepping in. She'll be my stand-in while I'm vacationing on Cape Cod. And I'm going on vacay, y'all.
That's awesome.
But I have to write every morning, so I'm going to be accountable to all of you.
Yep. Stick with it.
What goes around comes around. That's all I can say.
Yep.
Exactly.
And
If you're
great. I love her. She's wonderful.
And if you are, Miss MKA, thank you, Sean. And if you're ever wondering about our schedule, it's always on our Friends and Fiction website, as well as a sidebar that has events on our Friends and Fiction Facebook page. And if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, please do that, because every week we send out a newsletter. Christina answers some great questions on our newsletter this week about what her idea of a great day is. I think it's going to Australia. I'm not sure. So don't forget, you can keep up with us on that Friends and Fiction newsletter.
So, Christina, here's the one final question we promised. So we usually ask our guests what the influences around reading and writing in their childhoods were, but you already kind of touched on that. So I would love to ask you about the book you wrote with your mom. The conversation begins, mother and daughters talk about living feminism. So you've said that this led to a powerful lesson in the value of women telling the truth about their lives. Can you talk a little bit about how that shaped your writing going forward?
Yeah, so the second wave of the women's movement was in the 1970s. And it was women who, the first wave was sort of the suffragettes, right? And the suffragists, whichever you want to call them, and getting the vote and all of that. And then the second wave was about equal work for equal pay and, birth control and sort of women's issues that were people galvanized around and wanted to sort of make the world a better place, especially for mothers and for women working, et cetera, et cetera. And, but a lot of those stories, again, as I've been saying about my own novels set in the past, weren't necessarily stories that we were reading about in school. And so interviewing even, my kids going to school didn't know much about the second wave of the women's movement. And my mom and I were really interested in looking at how and if feminism is passed from one generation to the next. And so we wanted to sort of explore the idea of how you rebel against a rebel, as I said. And so we interviewed all these women, and what I learned through the narratives was just that many of these people had been a part of pivotal moments in American history. And, recently there have been some miniseries actually with like Kate Blanchett. There's one, there's a great one. Gosh, it was about Phyllis Schlafly, I believe. And there just have been some terrific sort of revisitings of that period. But getting to talk to women who'd lived through it was really important. And I think it shaped my interest in writing fiction, which is, as I think I've said, writing about little known pieces of history and writing about corners that people don't necessarily know about that might have big reverberations. And I think the second wave of the women's movement has had huge reverberations, and that we can all now take things for granted as a result of them. And so, so that book was really important for me, and also crazy to write a book with my mother. I mean, we were very intimately engaged for a couple of years working on the book. And, before that, I was sometimes a bratty teenager and we didn't always get along, but somehow doing that project together where she was in charge of the interviews for the mothers and I was in charge of the interviews for the daughters, but we did them together and we were present with them and we edited back and forth, was a really special experience.
That's awesome.
Wonderful.
How lucky are you to have gotten to do that?
I know. I'm thinking my mom and I writing a book, my daughter and I writing a book. None of it's gelling, but anyway,
Yeah.
none of it's clicking. But
Well, to go back quickly to Dorothea Benton Frank, she and her daughter,
yeah, they wrote that book together.
Yeah.
They wrote Teddy Spaghetti together.
Yeah.
So to all of you out there, we encourage you to grab Christina's novel, The Exiles, The Exiles. And how could you not, with everything that you just heard from her? And hopefully from our bookseller of the week, Watchung Books. I'm probably saying it wrong because that's my superpower. So Christina, we are so happy to have you here. It was so much fun. And thank you for being so open and sharing about your inspiration and your life and your mom and all of the things that flowed into this story and sharing your wisdom. This has been a really wonderful night. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. What a joy. What a privilege to be here. Thank you.
It was our pleasure.
It's
Happy
our pleasure.
anniversary.
Yeah,
Happy anniversary. Thank you for spending part of your anniversary with us. Now go spend the rest of it with that cute guy.
Tell your husband thank you.
Yeah, thank you for loaning you to us. So everyone out there, you are such an amazing book-loving community, and we will see you a minute at our Story Point after show, the Sip and Stay after show, and come back next week, same time, same place, as we welcome Laura Willig with our special guest host, Christina McMorris. Meanwhile, to keep you busy, check out our podcasts, our Winter Wonderland subscription, and all of the fun going on our Facebook page and our book group and our podcast. Good night, y'all.
Thank you for tuning in. Join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs every Wednesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And please subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here. Good night.
Hi, guys.
Wow.
Great.
I'm totally intimidated. I'm just going to go hide my head.
Why?
Because she's so amazing and has
She is.
accomplished
She's
so
great.
much.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah.
But she reminds us, well, first, y'all, welcome to our Sip and Stay Story Point after show. We're going to break down the night. And don't forget, for those of you who are watching, we want to show the power of our amazing community. So pop over to Instagram, look up Story Point Wine, and follow them. Let's see how many we can get in one night and impress them.
Ooh, great idea. And I think they have a website and a newsletter too, right? So you can sign up. You can sign up for that. It's just, they fit so well with us because I think they're all about story. I mean, that's kind of the story behind their brand is
And
the
they have
power of
wine.
story.
And they have
I mean,
wine.
that's really the part that fits especially well with us. But stories and wine. It's no wonder it's the wine of Friends in Fiction.
Oh, so intimidating. And not only that, but she reminds us again and again what we all talk about.
Yeah.
If we're not terrified, why bother?
Right.
You know what? I actually have to say, so I met her, a lot of books ago. So, it was years ago, and I was like terrified to meet her because,
Really?
yeah, it was like right when the Orphan Train was, it had just been so massively successful. And is it A Part of the Sky? Is that her next book? Is that what it was called? That I loved so much. So I was just talking about A Piece of the Sky.
Yeah,
A Piece of the Sky. It was a few years ago. So, my memory is not that great, but it was such a great book. But I was so terrified, like to meet her, and I was so intimidated. And she is one of the most approachable, like kindest, warmest people. And she just.
And she gets as terrified as we do. right?
Yeah.
Like if I bit off more than I can chew, how am I going to find the research? How much of my research do I put in there, even though I want to put it all in there? Because guess what? I spent a month researching that, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I also always appreciate hearing from someone who wasn't an overnight success. I mean, that's wonderful in its own way, but it's great to see someone like her who really worked her way into this and learned and pushed herself and became better. And I mean, she's phenomenal. She's at the top of her game. She's doing an amazing job.
I remember when the Orphan Train first came out, I had gone to a writer's workshop in Antioch, Ohio, and I've been going for a few years, and had some friends. Actually, I was part of a book club there. And I told one of my friends, the Orphan Train wasn't an overnight success.
Yeah.
I think if I remember correctly, that book was a slow build, and it was a bookseller and a librarian hand sell. Like word. That's my memory. I could be wrong. We'll have, maybe we'll ask Christina, we'll text her and say, hey, is that the case? But it was this huge, slow build of people saying, wow, what an amazing story.
And you know what else struck me is she said both about the Orphan Train and about this. It reminded me of Vanessa Riley last week.
Right.
They both said the story had been brewing for a decade. Both of them said that. And I'm thinking, once a story starts brewing for me, a decade is a long time. But guess what? It's not, right? If there's something that's been kind of back there tingling and it's been a decade, maybe it's time to do something about it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good
No,
point.
I have one I want to write, and I guarantee it'll take me a decade to write it.
Well,
so I hope no one else writes it first. But
Wait,
that's
a decade in real time or a decade in Christy time, which is really like 2 weeks.
which is like carpool, pretty much carpool.
Yeah, she's like, I probably won't have it written until the middle of next week. So
hilarious.
Patty
are envious.
Patty and I were working. Patty had already been working for quite a while and had a contract for her book. And I just sort of started out of nowhere and was writing it in secret. And I finally shared it with y'all. And Christy basically goes, yeah, I think I'll write one. And then the next day it was done.
Yep.
It only took a day. That's so true. No,
I
will say Christmas
a day in
but like,
Patty
what else
years.
was I doing? It was COVID. It was freezing cold outside. Every Christmas thing was canceled. Like,
what else were you doing? You had nothing else on your plate. You didn't have friends in fiction. You didn't have a child.
You didn't have a
you
book
weren't moving
out
of that house.
Yeah,
remember?
nothing. You weren't single-handedly running the Friends in Fiction shipping depot. I mean, it was really
the bags. Y'all, I had a nightmare last night that all the coffee mugs came to me instead of to Nantucket. I got up this morning and emailed
That is a nightmare. Oh my God.
That is a nightmare.
Horrifying.
Oh man.
Okay, so you're going to Cape Cod tomorrow.
I am. We are we have a 5:30 pickup to go to the airport, and I have to finish packing. We're gonna go. Tom, my great husband, got us tickets. I said, I want to go. I've always wanted to go to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. So, and I tried to go online and buy tickets and they were like sold out, but I said, call them and just tell them some bullshit story about your wife, is dying and her last wish is to go to that museum.
But my wife is a famous author and she would like to
she'll bring a bunch of books and leave them there.
She'll let you take pictures with her.
Yeah, that's gonna float a lot of boats in Boston. Anyway, somebody took pity on him and didn't give us tickets, but they found, I guess, some people canceled. We're gonna go to a Red Sox game. I don't know. I don't know if we're going to wear our Braves spirit wear or not. That's probably a bad move.
No.
And then Friday, we take the ferry over to Nantucket, and I'm going to do a signing at Mitchell's Books.
Awesome.
And I'm really excited about that. And then we're going to go to Cape Cod and see some very old friends. And I'll have to write every morning, so I'll be on the text chain with you all.
Good.
Okay. We're back on our writing horses for sure.
I don't want
Yes,
to brag,
yes.
but I get to
back.
see Patty next week. So
Oh,
everyone be
that's
jealous.
good.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, Meg says, see if I can solve the Art Heist mystery.
Or write a book about it. Or
should.
that.
I do love a good heist.
I know.
Right up your
That
alley.
might be your next book.
Yeah.
Mhm. You never
Yeah, well,
know.
I am in the mountains, and it is crazy how just driving up here from Alabama, like every whatever miles, it dropped 1 degree, 1 degree, 1 degree,
Wow.
1
Oh,
degree.
I'm so jealous.
Oh, it's
But you
just,
know, it's so weird because it's really cool here too. I mean, I guess it always is, but it's
Yeah.
been 82 for like days on end. And it was like 84 the week before. Like I'm knocking on all the wood because it'll probably be like 99 tomorrow.
Yeah.
But it's been like in the low, it's been so pleasant. I'm shocked.
not in Alabama.
Supposed
Not
to be
Florida.
99 here tomorrow, and
Oh.
it's rained every day for the past 2 weeks. It's like living in a dishwasher.
Are you a writer or something? Like,
Hot and it's steamy.
I saw there's this like little piece of paper and this like it was like across the street. I saw one of those like group bulletin boards and it said, "Want to know what it's like living in North Carolina in the summer? Take a shower, don't dry off, put all your clothes on, and walk around for a while."
with a sprinkler hitting you. With a sprinkler
Yeah,
hitting
exactly.
you.
Exactly.
No, it's nice to get out of the heat for a bit and get. So, Christy, I can't wait till you get here.
Excited.
We'll send you guys pictures and then hold flat Kristen and MKAs.
Like I still have flat Kristen and like I'm not
you
sure what
still?
to do with her. Like, is there a protocol? Like, do I just keep her forever or
Obviously. I
I mean,
I would
you can't get rid of her.
I know. I'm
I
like
would I would recommend a shrine. Is that
Right.
too much?
Okay.
What should we put
not
on it?
next week because I won't be home, but the next week I'm gonna have her like hanging in the bookshelf, like, taped up.
Oh my
I
gosh.
expect some candles, maybe some wine offerings. Story points acceptable. The
story
I
point
sent her
is
a picture
acceptable.
the other night. My parents were here and we're all sitting around the dining room table, and Kristen is like in a chair. And
I should
put
be.
her there. I mean, that's just where
my
I have like
gosh.
left her.
Did you put an empty wine glass in front of her at least?
Oh.
And by a wine glass, I mean a champagne glass.
I mean, I swear to you, this could be the start of a Stephen King novel. Like we carry around Flat Kristen, then we put a full wine glass in front of her, and then somebody looks over and it's empty.
And somewhere several states away, I'm drunk inexplicably.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a
Like,
knocking.
what's happening?
Then there's a knocking at the door, like in the bedroom.
Oh my God.
Patty, maybe you do your special doorbell
I
sound effect.
I think
I have
she's
been
proved that
fired
she can't.
from sound effects. I have been fired. Like literally, I've been
Okay.
fired.
My husband is cooking dinner downstairs, and I can smell it.
And I have another Zoom I have another virtual event at 9 p.m. So I
That
also
makes me
have
want
to
to cry.
We'll
That really
show
makes
up
me
and
cry.
ask you questions. See, Maggie Van Walker, our managing director and
No sound
guru,
effects.
just wrote in the private chat, no sound effects for Patty. So
Yep.
sorry.
Sorry.
can't
We
help
love you though.
Yeah.
You have a lot of strengths, and that's the
No.
thing to focus on. So
All right. You have a great trip, Mary Kay.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I
travel
really-
safely.
everybody.
great show,
Love you
Patty.
guys.
Good
I'll
job.
miss,
Bye,
you,
y'all.
I'll miss you all next week.
We'll miss you. We'll miss you too. Send loads of pictures, okay?
I will. Bye.
Bye.